am Jess, and my presentation is on the affective filter hypothesis of second language acquisition. Language acquisition is mysterious. However, several theories have been proposed, and some of them have been supported as to how we acquire language. And these theories apply both to first and second language acquisition. And a lot of these hypotheses or theories derived from fields of psychology and linguistics. Despite all of the study that's been done by behaviorists like B.F. Skinner and his contemporaries, Noam Chomsky, and later Howard Gardner also contributed to revising and fine-tuning these theories. They all have to do with the mechanisms by which information is taken in, processed, and expressed back into verbal language. So something sets this theory apart, or hypothesis, apart from the other theories, which is that this one has to do with the individual's social and emotional experience at the time when they are being presented with or given an opportunity to learn new language. So let's look a little closer at what that means. So Stephen Krashen is the man who developed these theories of second language acquisition in his book Principles and Practice in Second Language Acquisition in 1982. He presented 5 different theories, and they contribute to one another, build off of one another. And this one sort of infuses the philosophy of all of the theories of language acquisition, because it has to do with what's going on for the learner at the time when they are learning. So Krashen was a professor, a linguist at the University of Southern California, specializing in language acquisition and development. He later moved on to the Department of Education and is now a professor emeritus there. He's still around. So in 1982, Krashen was working with Dulé and Burt, and together they derived the creative construction theory. And it was in this time when he was working with these 2 other men that he came up with his theories of second language acquisition. And I think his time creating the creative construction theory informed or laid the groundwork for him to write his book. So Dulé and Burt, they are the 2 who came up with the concept of an affective filter. So what is affect and what is an affective filter? So affect is a set of observable manifestations, this is just a dictionary definition, of an experienced emotion. So it's the facial expressions, gestures, postures, vocal inflections, intonations, all that sort of stuff. That is how we express emotions. So the conscious emotion that occurs in reaction to a thought or experience. So it's what we are aware of, and it's almost uncontrollable. It's how we present ourselves in the presence of emotion. So affective is relating to or arising from, coming out of emotion, so or expressing emotion. So an affective filter, you can imagine if you take the emotions that we're experiencing and imagine it like a filter in between us and what's around us, the tighter the filter or the stronger the filter, the less is going to get through and the less we'll be able to absorb. And the looser the filter or the lower it is, the more we'll be able to engage with whatever content is presented in front of us. So the affective filter hypothesis states that people acquire second languages when they obtain comprehensible input and when their affective filters are low enough to allow that input to access the language acquisition device. And the language acquisition device is the biological mechanism that was proposed in the innatist theory of primary language acquisition, and it's the innate biological structure which works to process external stimuli and then put it into memory and acquire new language or input. So how is the affective filter going to impact us in the classroom? What does it mean for us as teachers? The affective filter is impacted by a set of variables that can change from moment to moment depending on what's going on in the surrounding environment or internally for an individual. It relates to stress, anxiety, fear, nervousness, embarrassment, self-confidence, motivation, self-esteem, and what the social environment is like. So this is all about creating a safe, comfortable space in which to learn. The affective filter is like a wall that comes up in between the individual and their surroundings. And once that wall is raised, it's a lot harder to bring it down than it is to create an environment without walls to begin with. I'd like to say I think that the affective filter can be like a protective mechanism for the individual. When they have things going on that are unmanageable, it stops any new information from entering the system so that so the learner, the individual can deal with what's already happening on board. It can also be very limiting if it's related to issues of confidence or self-esteem and motivation or stress, and these things can be mitigated by us in the classroom. I realize here I've got my picture over the top there, but here we go, with the affective filter. So the affective filter blocks language acquisition. You can see up here, you've got your input, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. Comprehensible input, ideally, when it meets up with the filter, it completely blocks, it's blocked from entering the language acquisition device. And there is no acquisition. So yeah, when the filter is raised, it blocks absorption and processing of input, and when it's lowered, it will more effectively allow new language to be acquired. So what are our strategies for lowering the affective filter? We want to provide a space where all students feel welcomed and included, creating strong relationships with students and their families, avoiding negative reinforcement or punishment or reprimanding students, instead praising them for attempts, efforts, and job well done. And there's a whole bunch of different techniques that we can use to do this, and I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say about how we might want to create a low filter environment for our students. And I'd like to thank Marco for this image, because it really puts the idea of comprehensible input into a visual that makes sense. So when we're teaching, we want to teach just beyond the comfort zone of our students, using this idea of I+1. I being the comfort level of the student, and +1 being just beyond that comfort level. So we want to stay here in the blue zone. That's where the comprehensible input is, just outside of the comfort zone, which is the current level of language proficiency. In order to stay here, the input that we deliver must be authentic, relatable to the students, useful, serve a purpose. So another core principle of this hypothesis is that there are social, emotional variables which influence the acquisition of a second language, and the ones that Krashen points out are motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. And the varying levels of these three factors will determine how strong and how high the affective filter is in any given moment for an individual student. And it's going to vary from student to student. So what can we do to increase motivation? We can give students opportunities to self-select topics of study, encouraging autonomy, things that they find interesting, personally relevant. We can offer variety in the ways that we assess students and really focusing on not publicly pointing out errors or mistakes to avoid embarrassing students in front of their peers, and promoting any sort of efforts and positive feedback for just for trying, and not penalizing for incorrect grammar, allowing a lot of space for trial error, and giving time to process what's being learned, and space for them to communicate using their voice to practice the things that they're being taught. Some ways to make input more comprehensible is by using things students already know and think about, and teaching to those ideas so the words are more exciting and relevant to them. Creating associations between the current linguistic level and just beyond it. Making using accessible content to provide context clues, and non-linguistic cues such as gestures and nonverbal communication, as well as images to present information. And you can also use storytelling. There's endless ways to create a conducive learning environment, and using a little creativity can really help us to teach to our students in a way that they will be able to receive what we have to share with them. So my questions for you are, what are the variables that determine the strength and presence of the affective filter? And what can we do as teachers to create situations that encourage low affective filters? Thank you.